Okay, we're going to do a short video on and take a look at inheritance, just the basics. So when we're dealing with inheritance, we are dealing with multiple objects that have things in common, but also have things that are unique only about that object. So for instance, if I was wanting to do a system on all my employees inside my warehouse, well, I have to think about all the different types of employees I have. I have production workers or conveyor line workers, and then I have managers. I may have several other types of employees, but we're only going to stick with those two right now for simplicity. Now, when we think about these two types of employees, we have to think about what instance members do these two objects have in common, and then what instance members are unique to production workers or unique to managers but not to both. So something that they both have in common is they probably both have names. They probably both have some type of ID or employee number. They both probably have some type of hire date. Some other instance members might be what shift do they work, what's their pay rate, are they salary, or things that are only unique to those two. So things that are only unique, I put in the individual class itself or the sub or base. So I would put things like pay rate in here. I might put something like shift in here. Things that are only unique to these two types or only one type. So here again how it goes. All the instance members that are common, I put in my employee class. All the ones that are unique to each one, I put in each class. The common one, or the super, gives access to all its information, all its instance members and all its members, to the subs or the bases, production worker or manager. Okay, so let's take a look at some of the code. All right, now looking at this code, notice I have the employee, which is the super. I have the production worker, and that we're just going to stick with those two just to make sure that they're, again, pretty well safe and I don't have to worry about anything else dealing with that area. Okay, now how does the production worker get access to the instance members and the employee? Because that's where we hold the names, the ID, and the hire date. Well, the sub must extends the super. That's the link. Okay, that's the first rule about creating inheritance. Second is, when I create a production worker, there's its constructor, I must also pass in all of the data that I'm going to need for the super, like the name, the ID number, the hire date. So I pass in the data for the instance members that are in the production worker, but I also pass in the data for the instance members to its super that it inherits from. The first line of code in the constructor must be a call to the super constructor passing in the data. So when it says super, it knows to go to the employee. It finds its constructor, gets the information, sets it up. Now, the next thing about supers and subs. When I call a method from my driver, the first thing it's going to do is go to the sub to try and find the method. So as I go down through here, All my methods are only to this sub until I get to the toString. Now we've already overridden Java's library, but since I find a toString in the production worker, it will not travel up to the employee and try and find the method in the employee. There's a toString in the employee, but it will not go to it unless it meets a class that does not have its own toString. Now the only other thing is this will not give me access to print anything that's inside the employee unless I tell it to go to the super and force it to go to a method that I'm overriding in the production worker. So here it's going to go to the super and go to its toString so it can get the name and the ID. There's the name, there's the ID. Okay? And any other information that it needs. When it gets done here, it'll go right back to where it was called from and continue on. So in the worker demo, when I call production worker and I pass it all the information, then what it's going to do is pass in the data that it needs to the production worker constructor and also the data it needs for the employee. I have access to any method in both production worker and employee, but it will always look inside worker demo to see if it can find a method unless I've stipulated otherwise with the object name. It will then go to the object class file that I'm calling. If it cannot find that method inside the object or the sub, then it will travel up to the super. If it can't find it in the super, then it will go to the Java library. So this is just a basic level look at setting up inheritance.